at the Musial with Alan and Daniel. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good morning. Welcome into another edition of Meet Me and Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Shopta at C70. With me, as always, Alan Medlock, a Medlock 1, coming to you on Friday the 5th, the day after the 4th. That's the way these things work on the calendar. Um, Hopefully, everybody had a good 4th of July. Alan, we were talking about it earlier. You sound like you had a good one, dealing with some heat and everything, but otherwise, a good holiday.
I did. We did definitely fought some heat, and it cooled down when the storms came through, and we were lucky enough to where we were miss some. I don't think we missed it so much here in Tulsa, but yeah, got to eat a lot, hang out with family, and watch some fireworks. So it was a good time.
Yeah. Yeah. Good holiday. It's nice that I don't know, hopefully a lot of people maybe getting a chance to take the 5th as well, have a big long weekend. But we'll have Cardinal baseball today to watch as well. And had it yesterday afternoon, early game, I guess helps. I don't know. Would you prefer an early 4th of July game, or do you prefer a night game?
I had a really good time yesterday with the early start.
Mhm.
There were several good early starts yesterday to be able to watch and get home before the fireworks and it's the late games unless you're there kind of take away from the holiday
Yeah. Yeah.
altogether. So no, I prefer the day games. I'm a big fan of holiday day game baseball.
Sure. Sure. And I think that's for the most part. Yeah. There have been 4th of Julys, though, I know of, that, like, when the Cardinals played, like, on the West Coast,
Oh yeah,
the Angels or the
that's the
Diamondbacks or
Angels
something.
series stands out to me. You're right.
Yeah, and I remember some Diamondback series where you could go watch the fireworks and then come home and watch the last half of the game, as you're kinda winding down,
Yeah.
which is nice. But, yeah, you definitely, it's probably easier to get the games over with before lighting things on fire. Speaking of lighting, no, I don't know if I want to use that as a transition to the bullpen issues or not.
Oof.
Might might be appropriate, I guess. Let's go ahead and dive into that part of things. Because we know how the Cardinals week went. They split with the split with the Reds, and then played a tight series with the Pirates. And we can talk about that. We've talked about that, I think, in the past, where I know you don't concern yourself too much with how they win, just that they win, and that's not a bad idea. But we're seeing more and more that it feels like more this year than I have ever remember it. Games where people aren't available out of the bullpen, right? And because of usage or whatever. The Cardinals were not able to use. They didn't use Helsley the last two games. Ryan Fernandez has gone from a guy that they wouldn't use in the first week and a half of the season at all, to a guy that is so key that he can't pitch because he's pitched too much. And I feel like we're seeing the strain of that too, right? I mean, I don't know that there's anybody out there that is as reliable as they used to be. Helsley's pretty close. I mean, Helsley still hasn't blown a save, but there's still times when he comes in that it gets a little bit dicey. Um, Everybody else, especially out of those big three, don't quite have the aura that they used to.
No, the two that stand out the most are Romero and Kittredge,
Mhm.
just because they were so automatic in the beginning. Yeah, the you're right though. It's a little nauseating right now. I say that just because even in the games they finish out, like Helsley doesn't. I don't know the last closing situation. I don't think he allowed a base runner the other night.
Yeah.
I can't remember, but he has traffic every time.
Mhm.
A lot of a lot of strain on those pitches, but yeah, they're getting the job done, but they're frail right now, and that's a little troublesome. Just because you were right, I laughed after we got off the show last week about, or maybe 2 weeks ago, about the Gallegos comment you made about whatever gamble, I'm going to win the lottery, I don't play
Yeah.
before he comes back to where he was. Yeah, the you're right, and it's troublesome. I mean, the other night, if you remember, he used to strike everybody out because he had so much movement, but now he gets hit extremely hard. So yeah, it's a little worrisome. You walk away this weekend, or I say this weekend, but just
Mm.
because yesterday felt like Sunday, but you walk away this week pretty happy because I think you took a series in a situation where you played pretty poorly, but there's definitely cracks now, and you could kind of see where, I know we're going to kind of segue into this a little bit here, a little in later in the show, but you could kind of see where maybe some of that focus on what they're going to trade for may have changed a little bit.
I will say for Helsley, the last 3 outings, he's not allowed a base runner.
God, it didn't
So
seem like that.
yeah,
Yeah,
he struck out 4 over those 3 innings.
yeah,
So, that's good. I mean, it was the game, 1 game against Pittsburgh, 2 games against Cincinnati. But, again, I don't know, and maybe that's partly because I've tried to rest him a little bit more, and he's kinda getting a little bit of a breather. Um, but it was just very interesting that he didn't pitch yesterday when he had the first off and the third off. I mean, he'd had a little bit of rest here and there. Um, I don't know. Maybe they're trying to catch it where they can. Um, but have you ever? I mean, and maybe it's because we're in a different age and the stuff is out there more. But I just don't remember how many, so many guys being unavailable and us knowing that they're unavailable, perhaps
yeah,
in the past, or even as of the last couple of years. It just there was one game recently where they had like 3 or 4 guys that couldn't pitch, and that's like half your bullpen.
yeah,
The starters have occasionally picked him up. We saw a really good outing out of Pallante. That he went deep in a game. They've been able to help that a little bit, but it still seems. And I'm not blaming Ollie Marmol because it's just the fact that they're winning so many close games or playing so many close games that it becomes difficult to not use Ryan Helsley or something like that because you need to win and they can't ever. What the game against was it against the Giants, I guess, or some game recently that they got out to a 6-0 lead and they still had to wind up using Helsley because they made it 6-5. I mean
yeah.
they can't ever get enough of a gap to make a comfortable win.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, like yesterday's situation, there was um it there was so many runners that were left on base to where it kind of lightens the load a bunch, and they were pretty poor in that spot. And then it's one of those, a guy that we have a lot of faith in Donovan, who I give him a little bit of leeway on this. I mean, Michael A. Taylor scoring on the tag up from
Mhm.
second on the fly ball to left field. I'm wondering instinctually that this is going to be a terrible excuse, but that's where the ghost runner is an odd situation because naturally I'm sure he's thinking, first out, turn around and let's go. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? One of
yeah,
those deals
yeah.
because he clearly had kind of forgotten the out situation, and just one of those to make it a 3-2 game, get 2 guys on, then you get out of it. But it's never an easy going away win, especially it seems like it's more so on the road than anything. But yeah, I mean they kind of fail on driving guys in, but the games are stress inducing without a doubt.
You look at it, and I mean, granted, it's hindsight, and you take that for what it's worth. But I think there's also probably a front argument to be made that they used Helsley in the first game where they had a 3-run lead, and it
Yeah,
feels like that's the situation, especially when you're having now. Normally, if you're not using your closer every night or every like, you wouldn't even think about it. But in these situations and with the bullpen the way it is, I think, maybe, of course, you're probably going to have him prepared just in case. But still
agreed.
feels like a 3-run lead, depending on who else was available. And again, I'd
Yeah,
have to go back and look and who they'd used and who wasn't around and all that. But, you kind of wish that maybe in retrospect, at least, that they had have, you know, given somebody else a chance with a 3-run lead and, saved Halsey for this, a game coming up where, you needed him in extra innings.
Yeah, yeah, good point. And it's one of those that shutting him down that's a tough spot because you think secure the win. That's the one that you need them, and
Right.
it's one of those when
Sure.
even through this conversation you're thinking, yeah, it stinks that they couldn't use him, but they won without him. Let's at least
Right.
we'll look at the bright side. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those. This could come back to bite them in a game when you're trying to make up, a week's worth of baseball on the division leader. It's tough and it's puzzling, and it's a good question because I hadn't really thought about that, and I can't really answer your question of remembering a year like this when you remember so many guys shut down. And I just wonder if the load management term just
Hmm.
isn't so big in sports now that it's more publicized than it ever was. If that makes sense. So I'm not sure, but it's one of those. It's a great question.
Well, I think it's more publicized and it's more of a concept, right? I mean, 10 years ago, you knew you didn't want to overwork arms, but in a situation like that, they probably would have brought out Helsley. You know what I'm saying? They would have
Oh
just,
yeah,
because it was a save and they needed the win and all that kind of stuff. They'd brought him out, even though he'd pitched or whatever. And now they're being more committed, I guess, to this idea of okay, they're not pitching tonight, that kind of thing.
yeah,
Um, and no matter what the situation is. So yeah, I think that if it is partly because we load management has come to baseball and we hear about it, but I think also it's because it's come to baseball and it's just much more of a guiding light than it used to be.
sure, sure.
So yeah, I mean you're right. I mean you're right. They won and you never know, right? I mean you might use Healthy there and then you know get blown out or lose next 2 games or blow out you may not need him for the rest of the series. So it's hard to say, hard to keep him in reserve. It's just in situations as much as he's been used, if you can find a situation not to use him, maybe it's a good idea not to. But again, knowing how that all planned out, I'm not second guessing Ollie at all on that. It's like it's a hindsight thing for sure.
Yeah,
But I don't. And then again, then it's like okay, we're talking about the bullpen and how people are being overused. But then you've got, what's it? Brokovich, what did we say? How did we Boscovich, who
yeah.
came up and hasn't even pitched yet. The Cardinals brought up Gordon Graceffo, who pitched I don't remember 2-3 innings. And I guess because they felt like they weren't going to be able to use him again, they sent him down, brought Brockovich back up. But they haven't used him either, And I get that you don't necessarily want to throw a guy that hasn't pitched yet into a close game for major league debut, but when you're running out of arms, I mean, it feels like maybe you should try to figure that out or get somebody up here that you trust in. Now, I do think that I heard that a Roycroft can come back up, I think today, so I wouldn't be too surprised if there's a roster move that flips those guys. Um, but still, I mean, it does feel weird to say these guys are getting overworked and this guy can't get on the field.
Yeah, yeah. I was laughing because I finished the game on the radio yesterday,
Mhm.
and Horton made the comment. He goes, "Well, this is King's game to win or lose. They don't have enough guys left." And Gallegos is he was essentially has been ineffective, and Brokovic, I can't say his name,
Mm.
has yet to pitch a game in the big league. So, or yet to throw a pitch in the big league. So here we are. It's exactly what I mean. That's essentially what he said. So I was laughing about that, and I was like, well, in a short bullpen, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have a guy that an untrusted guy. I understand that um, to have a guy that I guess the situation says anything, but man, it sure seems like you could use that spot a little bit better than you have.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to throw him in the ninth inning for sure, or a 10th
Yeah,
inning, or whatever the case may be. But throw him in the when you've got a chance to overcome it, and hopefully you know, at worst, you get 3 batters out maybe and go on or, after if he gives up a hit, then maybe you can get somebody else in there. I don't know. It just feels like you got to at least get his feet. Well, we saw this early at the beginning of the year with Ryan Fernandez, right? We saw him be a guy that couldn't even get into a blowout, right? They wouldn't even use him to blow it. And then now all of a sudden, he's a key part of this bullpen, right? I mean, he's the one of these guys where we were talking about, oh man, they didn't want to use Helsley or Fernandez yesterday. And I'm not saying that Boscovich would be that kind of guy or anything, but until you put them out there and use them, you really just don't know what they're going to have.
Yeah, agreed. And that's I was trying to think back, and I can't remember a situation where you could have used them.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of short starts and stuff like that. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it's funny. I went to the transaction wire to see if there wasn't anything announced, possibly this morning, and there wasn't, necessarily significant. But yeah, it doesn't. It sure doesn't make a lot of sense, especially when you shut those guys down for back-to-back days.
And you mentioned Gallegos.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I had a feeling you were going in that direction. So.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting, right? I mean, he's been back. He's pitched in 3 games. He pitched a scoreless inning against the Braves. He pitched a scoreless inning and 2/3 against the Reds, and then he gives up, a home run and just gets 1 out against the Pirates. And it kind of feels like this has been what Gallegos has been definitely this whole year, and it feels like the last couple of years, maybe a little bit more extreme than the last couple of years. But a guy that can put together 2, 3, 4 really good outings and then just blow up, right? Maybe for 1 or 2 or 3. I mean, he's very kind of streaky, but do you see them doing anything with him? I mean, I feel like this is the last year of his contract, right? I believe. Do you see them, or do you think they're just going to? I mean, maybe they'll find another injury, but for the most part, it sounds like he's going to just be in that bullpen. And I think that's a dangerous situation too, right? Because you just don't know what you're going to get. So you can't throw him in any kind of tight situation.
Yeah, that's God, it's funny how things happen, because of going from one of the most trusted guys in that pen to now we're thinking, gosh, when is this going to be over?
Yeah.
Type situation. And it comes quickly. I mean, if you remember, he was an automatic strikeout when he started, and you just wonder, here we are talking about load management and all those good things and think, well, did they just overuse him?
Yeah.
Don't know. But yeah, you're right. And I did wonder about the contract. Did they not extend him at kind of a time that was a little bit puzzling anyway?
Oh and granted, Giovanni Gallegos' flaws have stood out to me more than maybe some others and more than they probably should over the last couple of years. But I remember when they made the extension that I felt like he was a guy that they didn't need to do it. I don't remember if I was thinking like he could have been a non-tender. But yeah, it was a situation where and it's a reliever, right? I mean, you always get after 4 or 5 years, you are always kind of dancing around. Let's see, they signed he's got a 2-year extension for 23 and 24. And he's got a 25 team option, which probably didn't happen. It kind of bought out his last couple of years of arbitration. So it's hard to say it was a bad thing because they were going to, they just kind of bought out arbitration, but still it's a lot easier to non-tender a guy that's going into arbitration than non-tender a guy that you're paying, $5.5 million to or whatever. Did I lose you again?
No,
I
actually hit the mute button this time, so I talked and no one was listening. So no, you're exactly right. I remember the extension, and you're thinking, well, how many miles does he have left in the arm? Because that's the question we're going to run into. I mean, look, in this talk of load management, you're thinking, okay, is on the backside, is this what happens if you don't? I mean, I'm not certain. It's funny how effective he was in the beginning, especially as a strikeout guy, to where now it's completely flipped. It's you just I don't know how many miles are left, but you do kind of wonder if this isn't the end of the road, quicker than the end of the season, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. I mean, when Gallegos came up, you remember he was the guy they continued to bring in when the bases were loaded,
Mm-hmm.
because he had a stretch where he had stranded runners for I don't know how many. I mean, he'd not done anything, and they would bring him in with the bases loaded, and he'd get out of a jam, and then it was great. And there's no doubt that the Cardinals, won that trade. I mean, Luke Voigt still had a nice little career bouncing around, but the Cardinals have won that trade with the Yankees. But I mean, he had a good ERA in 2022, but I think you started to see that home run rate started to creep up. Um, he had his spells where he was struggling, and then it's kind of hit that the last couple of years. Now, that being said, it's the walk rate that's killing him.
Yeah,
Because right now his strikeout rate is 11.3 per nine, which is right in line with a lot of his career. But he's walking 6.8. Now, granted,
yeah,
he's only got 12 innings this year, but we've seen that walk rate start to increasing over the last couple of years, and the home run rate has increased. And you can't take those two things out of a starter's bad enough, but out of a reliever, it'll just kill you.
yeah. That's you just wonder. You go, well, moving off the charts, or has he lost the ability to command the strike zone?
Yeah.
That's where it's a little worrisome. Yeah, it's one of those. He used to hardly give up a lot of hard contact, and then you saw the bomb the other night, and you're just like, geez, what's happened? But yeah, he was the guy. If you remember, he was the closer without a name
Hmm.
because he would come in and put those fires out, for him in any inning type situation. So
Yeah.
yeah, it kind of stinks to where it's gone.
Yeah. I mean, he gave up over the last in 21 he gave up 6 home runs in 80 innings. In 22 he gave up 6 home runs in 59 innings. Last year he gave up 11 home runs in 55 innings, and this year he's given up 6 home runs in 12 innings. So,
Yeah,
you know, and relievers typically have a short shelf life, right? I mean, that's
sure.
just the way it is. And um, he'll be 33 next month. So, you hate to say it, but I mean, somebody might take a flyer on him next year, but he's probably
Oh
getting
yeah,
close to the end of the road, just because
yeah.
that's the nature of the game, unfortunately.
Yep. You're right. I mean, rubber arm. That's the situation. Is big league reliever.
Yeah, yeah. So we've seen good stuff. We talked about it briefly a minute ago. We've seen a really good run of starts out of Andre Pallante in that fifth starter spot. Couple that with the fact that we are seeing these, you know, bullpen issues. Does that shift the focus? Again, I do. I think the Cardinals need to do a lot of things at the trade deadline, but does that shift the priority focus from getting a fifth starter or getting another starter? Didn't have to be a fifth starter, I guess. To getting a top line bullpen arm, or at least a reliable bullpen arm. Do you think that shifts the front office focus, or are they still just kind of trying to figure this out?
Uh, yeah, I think that it's playing into a situation that the Cardinals love, which is to move relievers around and bring some in. It's a kind of they would make that move when you knew that they needed some more offense, and
Mhm.
it's just that their mo essentially. The I do wonder. I think that they're worried, especially after last season, to being exposed with just the five starters. So I think that you're going to see somebody brought in on the veteran terms of it. Bringing in as potentially a sixth guy because you can't really unseat Palante at this point, and no one has taken the job and running with it.
Mhm.
Anywhere else. But I would think their big ticket that they'll try to go get is definitely something in the bullpen, and then they'll sell it as, hey, we're going to try to shorten these games a little bit, and that's where we think that we've needed it the most. This because of the wear and tear that we've seen, and goes back to what we were talking about, the situation where a series that I mean, I feel like you have to win on the road, which is a good signal where two of your huge bullpen arms don't even throw.
Mhm.
Um, I think that would probably be the easiest way to go. But maybe they'll surprise us this year and go big and do both and do it with guys that are at the top of the trade market. So I'm not certain, but you know for a fact that they will get bullpen pieces.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much any contenders trying
Yeah,
to get some sort of bullpen piece, even if it's just a mid-level arm that will improve things, and maybe mean that you don't have to use a Kittredge or a Romero in every game that you have a lead in the seventh inning. So I don't know. I think that I do think that's probably going to be the focus. I'm sure they're looking at both. I just don't. I mean, I still, and we've talked about this before. I don't necessarily want to go over it too much. I still don't know what pieces they have to make multiple trades.
yeah. Oh,
You
yeah.
know,
No, I agree, and it's also one of those. I more just for the chaos theory. I want to see what happens when Edmund comes back,
yeah,
because that's it's kind of pushing in that situation now to where um I'm an Edmund guy. I know more so than you have been, just because
mhm,
of for obvious reasons. Not neither right nor wrong. I'm just
yeah,
I'm curious to see his usage and in what they do roster wise to make something happen. And as crazy as it sounds, the new bar issue is gonna make for some uncomfortable conversations. Because you're playing
mhm.
fairly well right now with this roster, and it's going to have to be shuffled a little bit. um, so you're right. I mean, I don't know who they would look to move. Maybe that would be some of the problem, alleviate some of the problem. But you're right. I'm not certain the quality of the pieces they're going to move out in other organizations' eyes.
Well, and here's the other thing that I think is becoming an interesting issue is Pedro Pages has proven that he can play in the major leagues, right?
Yeah,
I mean, he's may not be, but as a backup catcher and a guy that plays, you know, 2-3 times a week as Contreras either DHs or gets a day off, he's proven he can do that and do it pretty well. Um, you've got Contreras who isn't going anywhere. But Ivan Herrera will be back here pretty soon, and I mean, they've carried 3 catchers some this year, but with the roster the way it is, especially like you said, with Newbar coming back, with Edmund coming back maybe by I don't know about the All-Star break, but maybe by the end of the month. Um, I don't know that it's wieldy enough to carry 3 catchers, right? So do you
yeah,
send Pages back down to Memphis? Do you start looking at a deal with one of those catchers? I mean, we've talked about, Ivan Herrera being a trade chip a couple of times since Contreras got signed. Um, he's proven himself a little bit more in the major leagues. He's also proven himself to be a guy that you can be run on at the moment, but that's a different story.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, Go ahead.
No, no, no. Go ahead. I'm going to build on something we
Yeah.
talked about last week, and
I will
that's
say it was very interesting. My co-host on Gateway, David Jones, was at the game last night, and saw Herrera throw out a base runner. So,
oh, nice.
maybe they did a little work on the arm or something, or just happened to catch one. But yeah, I wonder if maybe that's a piece. I don't know, because it becomes difficult to see how this team can carry 3 catchers, not only this year, but going forward, right? I mean, Contreras is gonna be here for a couple more years, 3 more years after this, and I get that you don't necessarily want to deal off, but you also got Jimmy Crooks and, Leonardo Barnall that are coming up that, may or may not pan out, but, have a better chance of panning out in this regime than they did when Yadier Molina was behind the plate. I don't know. I think that the roster management is going to be quite interesting over the next little bit, and see how they start fitting in the 26 man, because you got, like you say, three hitters that may be coming off the injured list in the next you know, 3-4 weeks, and most of them sooner than that. Because Newbar and Herrera could be back this time next week. We could see them. So, and with the way that rosters are split, we're talking about hitters that are going to have to go, and how that manifests is going to be very interesting.
St. Louis fans are one of a kind, and you'll always be in this
Right, had a little technical issues, dropped down for a minute. We got him back, and so we're talking about the fact that the roster guys coming back and trying to figure out where these three guys are going to go. Especially because we're talking about the way the roster is 13-13. You don't see any different splits anymore. So we were talking about having to figure out where to put three hitters on this roster.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, and it's before we lost connection, I was looking at the Cardinal WAR leaderboard, and it's one of those to where you bring in those three guys back, and it doesn't necessarily fit. Pages has turned into that the lovable backup
Hmm.
that St. Louis loves because he's a good catch and throw guy, and they need it because everybody's running on him. It's type
Right,
situation.
right.
So to be able to justify moving him out right now is going to be tough. Especially when
Hmm.
you need a guy. Um, you know, Contreras is going to be your number one in your DH when he's not in the lineup, and him hitting for power this weekend or this weekend. Him hitting for power this week is an interesting development because, gosh, if he gets going, they could be in a really good spot because that was one of the things that I wondered about would be zapped with it being a wrist injury if that was going if that would be the last thing to come back.
Hmm.
So that was interesting to see, but it's also one of the situations to where back to the chaos theory a little bit. It's going to be tough to set Burleson, and I don't know if they will in any situation. He's been one of your better hitters, and he's going to be talked about going to the All Star game with he and Wynn and Helsley, and some of the guys that I think deserve it. But so where do you play these guys? That will be, and we talked about Siani going down in a situation, and one it kind of seems counterproductive to me because he's been your
Hmm.
best defender.
Right.
I have zero clue where they're going to go, and it goes back to the old adage: these things seem to work themselves out, but but how close are we in a situation to where you're going to see a Burleson take some of Goldschmidt's at bats too? I mean,
Hmm.
it begs the question. I mean,
Yeah.
how are you going to fit everybody in?
Yeah, I mean, and that is, as you say, baseball works itself out, and that the Cardinals have had that happen to them. It feels like so often, right? It feels like so many times we've done shows like this, right? We've talked about how the roster is going to have, and this is coming, and this roster crunch is coming, and they're going to have to make significant moves, and they're going to have to do something really important, and they don't. I mean, I'm just
Yeah,
because either because somebody gets hurt or they drop, they move somebody to 60-man IL and 60-day IL, sorry, and then that frees up a roster spot or whatever the case may be. Um, so that it always seems to be somehow that they kind of work their way out of it. But with three guys coming up like this, it becomes very difficult to see how it's just going to work itself out.
yeah,
Um, you know, and I think they're going to have to make some decisions, and maybe that is, Pages goes down to Memphis for a while. I mean, you look at his overall numbers for the season; he's not hitting 200, but over the last 28 days, he's hitting 250 with his couple of home runs. I feel like he's starting to kind of get his feet, planted in the major leagues. Maybe who knows? Maybe we're reading too much into a small sample, but still, maybe you send him down for a while, and Herrera's your backup again. Um, I think you're right that you're going to start seeing. We've seen Contreras DH a decent amount, but you may get forced into letting Contreras be the catcher more because
yeah,
Burleson's going to be doing some DHing
sure,
because Newbar is going to be on the outfield. I do think that coming to the end of this month, it's going to be, I'd say it's 50-50, maybe, that Dylan Carlson's a Cardinal in August.
yeah,
Um, I just, I think you're right with Siani that they want to keep him up there for the defense, and if the lineup's strong enough, you can leave him in a game. But if nothing else, you keep him in there for the seventh, eighth, and ninth innings type of thing. Especially with the way that this, you're not necessarily getting a whole lot of strikeouts out of this rotation. You need somebody to cover that, and especially if it's going to be, I mean, Newbar's going to be stronger too, but um, and then maybe it's Donovan out there. Who knows? I don't know. Um, but I just it's starting to really feel like that's the piece that they're going to move on from.
Yeah.
And I hate that because I know that, you know, and it's partly him and partly just situations. He struggled, but I do wonder if he'll be another guy that goes and succeeds somewhere else. But it also may be that, what we saw in, his rookie year was the best we're going to see. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, that may be the low hanging fruit. Yeah, I
Mm,
mean, you're right about that, and it's funny because he, I've actually thought that he's played well and has fit this role really well, and
mhm,
it's not what we expected. I mean, we kind of expected a cornerstone guy, and they knocked around the idea of and kind of pushed it that he had future leadoff potential. You
mhm,
know,
mhm.
so yeah, I don't know, but you're right. I mean, that's it's kind of the odd piece at this point, because you could justify the Siani's the late inning replacement, and he's done well enough. And you're not, there's the Edmund Newt Bar situation where they're going to play. Donovan can play all over, but he's kind of been a mainstay. Where he is in left field, and Burleson's arguably been your best all around hitter. It's yeah, it's tough. I mean, he could very well be the odd man out. You're exactly right.
Yeah, now I would, and again, it's another guy. His OPS plus for the season is 57, so that's well below average. But when you look at his recent run, the last 28 days, he's hitting 283. Is just a 699 OPS, but and it's better. Last 2 weeks has been he had a 933 OPS, which again, small sample size. That's 20 something at bats. Because he's not playing all the time or constantly, but it does feel like he's starting to get a little bit of a groove. Even if it's not the power hitting that we would like, because he hasn't hit a home run all year. Um, it's still putting something up there. But is that what the Cardinals need right now? Because it really feels like they need a little bit more punch, right? We're talking about these 4-3 games, and there was a week where they didn't even score 4 runs. So, even if he is starting to develop to something, and maybe maybe the power will come back, it's hard to see how you can continue to carry him if you want to upgrade the offense and that upgrade that's coming with the players that are hurt.
Yeah, yeah, that's um, eh, yeah, it's a sad state of affairs. I mean, because like I said, he's fit into this role well, but not a lot of power, and it. Yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, it's one of those to where maybe for the better of the player that it could be the situation could work out well for him, but
Mhm.
yeah, you're right. I mean, this isn't what we expected because we were thinking this was going to be mainstay of the lineup for a long time. So,
Yeah.
my question back to you is
Mhm.
is what's the likelihood that someone from the everyday lineup gets moved?
It's hard to imagine just because of the struggles that we're having.
Yeah,
And I don't know who it would be.
yeah, it's tough. I mean,
And I mean, the only person that you could even, and I don't think this, um, but I think the only person you could even really make much of a case for would be, I guess Donovan, right?
yeah,
Um, because the corners aren't going anywhere. I don't, they're just not. I mean,
yeah,
I think we continue to hope that Nolan's going to have a bounce back year next year, but I think we can. I don't think anybody's holding out hope that it's going to be, the second half of the season is going to be a strong one for him.
yeah,
And Goldie's kind of the same way, but Goldie's, only got half a year here. And I know Katie Wu this week said that she wouldn't necessarily rule out this being or rule, say this is definitely last go around for Goldie. Um, because she said, if the Cardinals extended him a contract offer, he'd probably accept it. I just don't think they're going to, right? I mean, as much as they like legendary and franchise players and would love to have Goldschmidt end his career in a Cardinal uniform, there are so many different options at first base right now that can
yeah,
do
yeah,
what he's doing, and there's no guarantee that he's going to bounce back. I just I can't imagine they're going to do that unless they give him some sort of you know, cut rate deal that allows him to be a, part-time first baseman, and I don't know that he'd want that.
yeah. No, yeah, I think that's the biggest the when we talk about Edmund and Newt Bar and those guys coming back, we've yet to bring up Jordan Walker at all.
Right.
And that I still think that's a good sign that he's going to be down there and maybe work through things to where he can come back and be the star that they wanted to be and avoid a Carlson type situation. I think that not that that's in their thought process, but that's one of the things that you'd want to see, to where it's like, okay, let's give him time to mature down there. He's young. It's let's just see. With that being said, though, you're going to have, I would assume that he'll be in the lineup next year, and Burleson's going to be, and Gorman's going to be, and you're thinking those are the three guys that are probably going to be linked to maybe playing a little bit of first base. Burleson definitely, and not because he's a bad outfielder, but just because I feel like the answer is right there in front of you. Right. And as much as I love Goldschmidt too, I mean it's tough to draw a line of keeping all of them.
Right. Well, and like I said, if Goldschmidt was in his, like Nolan's 32 or so, and you think, okay, one, you got him for longer anyway, but you could see where maybe there's a bounce back. But Goldschmidt, after, granted, MVP 2 years ago, but the decline of the last couple of years and the age that he's at, and I think he's also said, hey, I'm not really interested in playing, past 40. So he's only going to play another couple of years. I just don't see where that works. For the Cardinals overall. Pulling up Jordan Walker, looking at his overall numbers in Memphis, 4 homers, hitting 250. I'm not looking at the splits. I don't know how much that's improved over the last little bit. It seems like we're seeing a lot of highlights on the Memphis Redbirds Twitter feed. But it still feels like he's a ways off. I mean, is this a situation where, because of the struggles he's had and because of the roster crunch that we're seeing, that we don't see a Jordan Walker the rest of the year, or at least until September when they expand by the 2 spots?
I think they're going to be extremely patient. That wouldn't surprise me at all. I thought that the messaging was sent not only for the move, but messaging was sent with Mo when we were there, that this is not going to be a rush. And, it was almost an uncomfortable situation, when the question was asked of, hey, we're, as much as we want him back, we're going to take our time with this one. Mm-hmm. And, I saw some trade. I think it was, honestly, I'm kind of embarrassed to bring this up, but it was a Facebook trade proposal.
Oh, well, there you go.
Was it for Brent? Did you see it? It was for Brent Rooker. Yeah. And I was like, well, I don't know why you trade a 22-year-old outfielder plus for a 29-year-old.
Yeah.
It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So I think that he's probably fairly safe. And, I think that they're going to kind of let this one marinate a little bit before they call him back up and see what they can do. And maybe they've learned their lesson over the last few years with some of these guys that, hey, we got to see, he's going to have to force our hand before we bring him up, essentially, and not in a bad way of let's see how much we can let him mature down there before we call him up and put him in the fire.
Yeah. I think it was kind of, telling maybe, maybe it's because they didn't want to get his hopes up or the fan base's hopes up or whatever, that they called up Victor Scott instead of him for the Rick Wood game. Obviously one of those guys was coming up, but it was interesting that they didn't, I don't know, again, maybe they didn't want to interrupt what Walker was doing. They didn't want people thinking, oh, here he comes, or they've decided, when he comes up, whatever the case may be, it's going to be for good. But Walker's been down longer than I think we all expected when he was sent down. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that is a telling thing that, hey, we're gonna try to get this right. And so far he hasn't forced that issue, right? I mean, we haven't, at least when results are not to the point of, oh, you've got to bring this guy up. I think about 2 years ago when Burleson was just destroying Memphis and they still wouldn't bring him up, right?
Yeah.
It's not anywhere close to that kind of level, what we're seeing. So, different situation, obviously, but I think that, you're going to have to see probably a 2 or 3 week stretch where Walker's hitting for power and really seems to have gotten his swing together before they even really consider bringing him up.
Sure. Yeah. And there's a refreshing element to that to me, that they're not going to force this to happen, and one that also means that the need's not that great.
Yeah.
There's enough production from the outfield, which is another thing, and that may be what's selling me on the move. But I'm just like, hey, let's just he's young, let's let him figure this out.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think it's just, it's interesting. We haven't seen just a whole lot of roster moves this year, but it's going to be interesting to see how this team looks like, even next week, perhaps, but definitely by the end of the month, by the end of the trade deadline, between everybody coming back and the trades that are made. This team on August 1st may be significantly different than what we're seeing right now, and I mean that's interesting because this team has played. We keep hearing about this. The Cardinals have the best record since Mother's Day, um, and that's great and all that. Part of that's based on that what 12-3 run that they went on right after Mother's Day. But still, even since then, they're 4 or 5 games over 500. As a over in that stretch, they're 4 games over for the year. Um, they've had an easier schedule, but that's okay. I think they've played teams like the Braves in that schedule
Hmm.
pretty well too. So, it's a team that looks solid. I don't think it's anybody's World Series favorite or anything, but you catch the right matchup and the right get a little bit of you get the right pitching matchups and stuff. You can do some maybe a little bit of damage in October. But it's going to be very interesting to see what we think of this team, come August 1st and when all the changes happen.
Um, will I think I know your answer already. Will we be impressed by the deadline, or more in line of thinking status quo for the deadline?
I mean, it's probably going to be closer to the latter.
Yeah,
Last year we were impressed, I think, with the deadline because as miserable as that was, we felt like Mo did a good job of getting pieces back for the pieces
yeah,
that were leaving. Um, that being said, you know, it's I guess maybe in hindsight that deadline might not look as good as we think. We'll find out. I mean, there's still a long way to go for those kind of pieces, but we haven't seen a lot of impact at the major league level yet. Let's put it that way.
yeah, 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 yeah.
But still, I think we were like that. I don't, you know, it's not going to be there's not going to be some big shocking trade. So I mean, it's going to be a fifth starter, it's going to be a reliever, it's going to be a bench bat, and I don't know that anybody gets terribly impressed with those. I mean, not that we don't need them, and I think everybody agrees that that's the kind of moves that need to be made, but they're just not moves that get people excited.
No, 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 no. That's especially it's the yeah. You're right. You're right. I mean, it's kind of a tough direction to go in, but you feel like you're close to things right now, and you feel like, hey, listen, yeah. After you rebounded from last year, I feel like you kind of need to go for it. But I think that they're going to be probably as pragmatic as they always are, and not shuffle the cards too much, so to speak. But you know, there is that element of you're trying to catch a team who's willing to make moves,
Yep.
and we'll and honestly, I was kind of surprised that Mo made the comments he did about being as upfront about what they thought they needed and that they were already looking at such, which told me they believe that they think that they're pretty good.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you're right. You're 6 games behind the Brewers, who made a move this week to shore up their pitching staff. It can be unless this team just really catches fire or the Brewers just fall apart. It's becoming harder to see how that happens, right? I mean, that's
Yeah,
not out of the realm of possibility. And you still have 6 games with the Brewers, 3 in August, 3 in September, beginning of September. So it's you can cut into it there and whatever. You can't rule it out. Um, but given the way that this team's kind of bounced around just around 500 or a little bit more, it's hard to really see that completely taken off. Could happen. We'll see. But I think it was interesting to me to just look at the wild card standings today, and the Cardinals are now 2.5 games clear. Right? I mean, of whoever's four. I think the Mets are the one team looking out or looking in. So, there's been a little bit of separation over on the wild card side of things, which is nice, right? I mean, it's kind of, and I think it's only helpful if you can get to where, you're not just every night going in and out of the playoff situation.
Yeah.
I think you feel better about that.
No, yeah, you're right, and it's one of those to where you also kind of want to just give the um you just kind of want to give the Brewers a little bit of credit. Is
Hmm.
they hardly ever lose on the days that the Cardinals win. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's tough to gain ground on them, and I mean it's one of those when I look at rosters, I want to say it doesn't look like they're the better team, but obviously they are according to the standings.
Yeah.
One of those type of situations. So it's you know I don't know, but you're right. I mean that just shows when you're able to clear a little space in the wild card, meaning you're winning,
Hmm.
and you haven't really moved the needle at all in the division. I mean you got to give the Brewers credit for them winning. So you're just
Yeah.
you I don't know. I feel like they have a shot at making a dent in the division. I truly do for that
Hmm.
very reason. But it's one of those two that for 2 weeks we've been thinking that run differential is going to change, and I don't think it has maybe at all in 2 weeks.
Not much.
Which
I mean, when you go and lose to the Reds by 7, and then your next
yeah
5 wins are by 1 or 2 runs. I mean, you can go 5-1 and lose ground in the run differential the way the Cardinals are playing.
yeah. And it's one of those where we made the comment. I said, this could go two ways. One, it can either galvanize you, and you're going to be really good in close games, which they've proven to be, or it's going to fall apart, and you're gonna lose a lot of footing, playoff wise. Period. If you can't if you can't close them out, and hopefully it stays in the win column now. But until yeah, I believe they're a contender. I truly do.
Mhm.
But it's one of those that you're just gonna have to take advantage of some of the run scoring opportunities that they don't.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just really frustrating when they
Yes,
don't, for sure. I want to, and you were talking about the Brewers. I feel like the Brewers probably have put together the best um alternate challenge. Over the since 96 or so. Um Definitely since 2000, right? We've talked about the Cardinals have been the class of the NL Central. They haven't always won, and it seems like teams rise up and have a couple of good years and contend, and then they fall back. I think the Brewers have been able to keep that success longer than anybody else over this span, because they've been good for a number of years now. We keep thinking that it's going to fall apart, and we keep thinking they don't have the
sure,
pitching, and this year they trade off Corbin Burns, and we're like, okay, this is where it goes. But they've been able to either get more out of their players than we thought, or it also seems like maybe it wasn't just all Craig Counsell,
yeah.
given how that's gone this year.
Well,
So it's been pretty impressive.
and they lost a key front office member to the Mets.
True. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you're right. I mean, it's one of those you look and you're thinking, they have put together something really good. I mean, losing, Burns altogether. I mean, I remember talk on Foul Territory of it, where they moving toward a rebuild type situation, and
Hmm. Yeah.
they're only a game behind the Dodgers for the second best record in the league.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's pretty remarkable. And also it says a little bit about the league, but yeah, I think that they've just done. No, they haven't had the postseason success, obviously, that the Cardinals have had over this
Yeah,
span, but to getting there, they've done a pretty good job, and so it is hard to just say, okay, we know. And to be fair, they've had some second half swoons at times too, so
sure,
maybe that happens again, but right now, it does seem it feels a lot. It feels like more than 6 games, I guess. Maybe because it just stays there. You're right. If
sure.
the
It never
Cardinals
moved.
it doesn't move, or then they Cardinals get to maybe they do win on a game day that the Brewers lose, so it's 5, and then they go back to 6 the next day, or go to 7 and it comes back to. I mean, right in that, it just kind of bounces around that area. So, before we wrap it, a couple of things on maybe off the field, I guess. I just saw that Derek Gould has put out story about the fact that it looks like Joe Buck is going to try to do the TV broadcast again on July 29th, I believe it is. So, which I didn't look to see. I assume that's I don't know if that's a Cubs series or not. Interestingly enough, that is the day right before the trade deadline. This year, the trade deadline is on the 30th. So may have some different players there, but so that's good, right? I mean, we know that I had the big Kerry Buck thing, and it got rained out, and it's nice to know that they were able to reschedule that.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. Do I
yeah,
have you?
yeah, you go.
Okay, cool. I was worried that we went out, did the same thing. So no, yeah. It was funny. I had to go over and scroll. Not that I didn't believe you. I kind of wanted to read a little bit into
Mhm.
that. So yeah, no, that could be pretty cool. The and it's funny. It's one of those to where in the beginning I wasn't such a big Joe Buck fan, but now I've kind of come full circle on that, and I'm like, okay, this is kind of fitting. And the fact that he wants to come back to St. Louis to work with Kerry is kind of cool. It's one of those. It kind of, I don't know if it was an all encompassing deal about just how crappy last year was, but it was it losing Danny Mac just felt different last year, and
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe if it was because of just the whole situation in general. And but now I'm kind of coming along on Carey as well.
Mhm.
It's funny, and he's really good and adds a lot of good insight. Really knows the league well, and to be able to come back and do this will be interesting to see how it plays out. And that would be a good broadcast to watch.
Yeah. I just checked the schedule. It's not a Cubs game. It's the Rangers, so it gets a chance to maybe the last time Joe Buck called a Cardinal game was
Yeah.
probably against the Rangers. So, um,
Yep.
will be interesting. Cardinal Rangers in St. Louis, so that should be an interesting matchup. But I think that also gets to the other point, right? Is that a lot of people aren't going to be able to see this game. And we know I haven't watched games in a couple of years, but I've had issues and things like that. But this week, Optimum also dropped values, which was our local cable people. So I've had people this week asking me how to watch the Cardinals now that they can't watch it on the regular thing. The bankruptcy hearing for um, Diamond Sports is scheduled for about that same time, right at the end of July. And I continue to watch this because I think it's going to be really interesting because I think we all got to be kind of rooting for um, that bankruptcy to kind of fail, right? I mean, for Diamond to go out of business because I think that's the way the Cardinals are able to put their own streaming thing together. If somehow all this, the Amazon money and all that kind of makes it survive, we're going to be in the same situation for quite some time. So I keep watching this, and I'm very interested to see how it shakes out because I know that the Cardinals really are interested. I mean, I feel like what we've heard from them, they're really interested in getting a streaming service out. In fact, I want to say maybe Bill DeWitt said at the beginning of the year that they could have one out next year, but it's going to be dependent on all this contract situation.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just ready for that to be done. I mean, it's the other day, which I mean, it's selfish for me to say this, and it's strictly, everybody has these kind of problems too. But I rushed home the other day to watch the first game of the doubleheader of the rainout. Well, I'm in Rangers territory, so
Mm,
we had Rangers plus something else, and I got blacked out of the first game of the doubleheader and couldn't watch it until the later one. And I'm like, you know what? You'd think in 2024 those things would be done with. You know what I'm saying?
right,
Not
right.
if you pay for it, you should be able to watch it. Essentially, that it just makes zero sense. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but it's just ridiculous that we're here. So whatever solution they come with has got to be better than what we have.
Yeah, I would think so. And I get. I mean, I have the MLB package, obviously,
Yeah,
and there's a desire for watching any game. But I think for any more than anybody else, maybe any other sport, it's also you're going to be able to people want to see their team, right?
yeah,
If I could buy only the Cardinals package, if that's the only team I would be fine, right? I mean, if that's what I would do. And I think that we've gotten to that point where you need to be able to sell individual tickets. So what I guess what I'm trying to say is, if Amazon has 4 or 5 teams and the Yes Network has a team or whatever the case may be, if you have to go to different places to get it, fine and dandy. But as long as you can get your team, no matter where you are, I think that's what we want to see. And the Cardinals are
Sure.
going to sell. I imagine they would sell something similar to what we're seeing in the Diamondbacks and the Padres, and I believe the Twins. That that MLB is selling it, through their stuff as just a specific team. We'll see something like that. But I mean, I do feel like, somehow this is all going to come out of that. But if not, I mean, yeah, I think we're hearing, many, many more people that are losing the access to this. And you're right.
Yeah.
In this day and age where you should be able to watch, you can watch lots of things. I can watch any other game on my phone or on my TV or, wherever I am, to not be able to watch, the one team that's close to you that you want to see seems
Well,
pretty
yeah.
crazy.
No, and the most troubling part of what we're talking about here is this is all coming from people who are going to be willing to go and look for it.
Yeah,
What about the ones that you're trying to win over who aren't going to go through 3 clicks to look for it?
absolutely.
That's losing a good bit of your base, and that's one thing. I think baseball is in a strong at a strong point right now. Just because I feel like Major League Baseball is good, you have some marketable stars, and I think they're trying to do that. I think that go down the list to see that college baseball is in a great spot because of things that we've talked about for the past month of the line of success is shortening from college baseball to professional baseball. I think you're seeing a situation where some of the negativity in high school and recreational baseball are getting a little bit better because the market grab from some of these travel leagues are they're getting dwindled up, and they're moving to more of the traditional type things where kids are interested again. All of those things being said, it makes zero sense that the best league in the world is still hard to find.
Yeah.
In a world where every football game is broadcast, every basketball game is broadcast, that you are in a situation where you just can't. I mean, we're in an Olympic summer. All eyes are on TVs right now. Every game should be on.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, and hopefully that's where we're getting to. But I think this at the end of this month we'll see some clarity on that, and hopefully that will get them, the right plan. I mean, it may not be settled, but hopefully it'll at least get us a little closer to that, and hopefully in 2025 we can all watch. Because I mean, I'm looking. My dad's going to be about to be 82, and I mean, he's not computer savvy or anything like that. So I haven't heard. I'm surprised he hasn't said anything because he's usually watching the Cardinals, and usually I thought he was watching them on cable. So,
Yeah.
he's not been able to, and but if it's the situation where okay, I can go set it up for him and he's good to go, right? But you're right. It made me think he's not going to go hunting it up. And baseball's got a lot of those kind of older people that don't necessarily that might be able to watch it, know how to watch it, but don't know go find it.
Yeah, exactly.
That up for them. So, but we'll see. We shall see. All right. Well, Cardinals get start off a weird 4-game series because they wrap over to Monday with the Nationals, then go home, play the Royals for 2 games, and then a day off in the middle of the homestand before the Cubs next week. So we should have some interesting stuff to talk about, and I'm sure we'll have some roster moves this week, either before the Royals series or before the Cubs series. That'll change this roster up a little bit. But until then, for Alan, I'm Daniel. Good night.
Good night.
Right now, their leading hitter all time against the Cardinals in postseason play at the plate. Beltran has murdered Cardinal pitching over the last 2 postseasons that he's played against them. Here tonight, he has doubled and scored. He's flied to left. He's grounded out, and he's walked. Bases loaded, 2 out. Cardinals up by 2 in the pitch. Fastball, Steve right ball. Carlos Beltran during the regular season hit 41 home runs, had 116 runs batted in. He has 3 home runs in this series. He's at the plate with the bases loaded, 2 down, the pitch. Curveball, swinging a tap foul, and the Cardinals are 1 strike away from going to Detroit in the 2006 World Series. Adam Wainwright gets a new baseball. Rubs it up, stands on, looks in with the bases loaded, 2 out. Cardinals leading 3-1 here in the bottom of the 9th inning. One of the most dangerous hitters in the business at the plate, Carlos Beltran. He is ready, so is Wainwright. The 0-2 delivery. Curve struck him out looking. The Cardinals are going to Michigan to take on the Tigers. They mob Adam Wainwright on the mound. They are National League champions and headed for Detroit as they mob the pitcher. And now Yadier Molina. In comes the bullpenners to pile on. The Cardinals have won this game 3-1 on a 2-run home run by their catcher, Yadier Molina, and they're still out on the infield celebrating. What a ball game this has been.